All right. Hey, welcome to my critical review of the book Ghost Work: How to Stop Silicon Valley from Building a New Global Underclass. All right. Now, it's written by Marielle Gray as well as Siddharth Suri. So, this is a non fiction book. It's a part investigative journalism, kind of part sociological, I don't know, research and part business analysis. From what I know, it's a written text. It's not a film or documentary. I had to read it. It reads like a blend of personal accounts and stories from people who work in these positions, as well as academic reports. From what I know, so it was published in 2019. Okay, and the book explores the growing hidden class that we just don't know of. It's these digital workers who do the work that artificial intelligence can't. This includes people who flag inappropriate work, like moderation. They identify objects and images, and they verify Uber drivers' identities. Okay, these jobs are usually routed through platforms like Amazon, Medical Turk, UHRS, Lee Genius, etc. Okay, this work is often invisible. Okay, it's low paying and it's precarious. Okay, the book comes at a time when conversations about these gig companies, about labor laws, and about AI and how all of that is extremely important in today's day and age. Okay. Now, the central theme I should talk about would obviously be power and exploitation in the digital economy or these companies. With the illusion of autonomy, kind of like how we all think these are all automated with AI, but it's actually being taken up by other workers, or the fact that it's always in isolation in that people have to work alone. They're not working with anyone else. They don't really have their own boss, right? It's that kind of thing, as well as the impact of capitalism on employment, how these companies are so focused on efficiency, they pretty much give up these morals, these ethical obligations you have to these people. It's just insane. So the author kind of aims to raise awareness about these ghost workers, to humanize the hidden labor behind everyday tech, right? They want to see the humans behind all these algorithms, and to hopefully, I guess, push companies and policymakers to offer better protection to all these different workers. Okay, now the tone is empathetic, it's academic, and while the author is clearly on the side of the workers, I think you should be, their critique feels a little tame, and I feel like overly cautious, especially compared to more radical labor analysis that I've seen. Now, here are a few critiques for me. I think there needs to be a stronger critique of platform capitalism, right? In that the book talks about problems like low pay, isolation, lack of worker protection, and unionization, but it doesn't really attack the system that creates those problems, right? Those platforms. The platform capitalism is the idea that companies like Amazon, Uber, DoorDash, or whatever, they build massive profits by creating platforms where workers uh, do the labor, but they don't really have any real rights or power or voices really here, right? A stronger critique would be that they would directly blame these companies and their business models for intentionally designing systems that exploit these workers, really. In order for the sake of saving money, for example, workers in India may often accept lower pay simply because their cost of living is a little lower than, I guess, the rest of the world, right? That's a consideration. But this lets companies also get away with paying fair wages globally. That's the thing, because they pick workers from these countries. Like, different countries have different labor laws, and generally these companies will choose places in the world where these labor laws are the weakest. And so, in order to avoid worker protection, all this other nonsense, in order to maximize their profits and to be more efficient. Anyways, the type of persuasion that I've seen used would be ethos. So, the book builds on credibility through first-hand interviews, long-term research, as well as academic backing that what they've seen. There's also pathos. It appeals to emotion with stories of people like Joanne, with an MD worker in Houston that we all saw, as well as Kayla, like a mother in India. Showing their struggles and their hopes to get better. Other types would be Legos. There's data, statistics, economic projections, to explain the scale and consequences of ghost work and using these workers. Okay, so there, if we go into character dynamics, right, it's kind of hard to do characters, but they bring up a lot of key people or platforms like companies, as well as peoples that tell their stories about what's going to happen or what's happening. Sorry, like Joanne, Kayla, Justin, Aisha. Those are the people. They share their stories, but as well as platforms like Amazon, Microsoft, as well as, and Uber. Obviously there's a relationship between these workers and these companies, but also there's a big relationship between all these people and consumers like us, like me for example, even, right, who benefit from all these workers. So all this dynamic reflects a deep system that we have set in place where companies really hold all the power and the workers remain voiceless and replaceable. And at the same time, I as a customer, or sorry, consumer, am completely out of the mix. One standout idea is the concept of algorithmic cruelty. Algorithmic cruelty. That's how you say it. Okay. Now, this software system treats workers impersonally. Okay. Locking them out of jobs without explanation or appeal. The author argues this isn't malicious, but a result of poor design. You know, and while that might be true, I still think that a forgiving term, and that this cruelty is a feature, and it's something that's not just a bug, but it's a gig labor kind of system that they've set in place, and I think it's entirely wrong. Now, one line that really stuck with me was the great paradox of automation is the desire to eliminate human labor always generates new tasks for humans. It challenges the myth that AI is taking over, when in reality, it's creating new, hidden work for unpaid humans. And that's insane. That really struck to me. That really got to me, right? Emotional impact, okay? Now, at times, these stories were very, very moving. Like, I felt it, when the workers were talking about their need for flexibility, their desire to support their families, or how little control they had over their work, right? Like the emotional weight is diluted by the book's academic tone and its soft conclusions. Emotional impact, right? I guess the delivery of the emotional impact. It could have done a whole lot better in terms of that, but just the way it was written out is the problem. I think these stories are entirely touching and they did move me, but they really fell short in terms of maximizing that emotional impact, and that hurt for me really. Now, the visual design, there is none. It's just a damn book, right? There's no sets and costumes and anything, right? It's not a documentary, so I had to. The only thing they had was the book. So I don't have the book. I don't have the book. So I was kind of like glued to my laptop and phone trying to read this entire time. But yeah, there is no soundtrack, no audio, nothing else to really talk about. So I'll just go into something that I care about in this book, or why I chose it, I guess. I've been curious about this. I'm curious about actually how I was always thought, damn, they really had systems for every little thing that we have set in place, and whether checking out if you're a robot, or checking if you're a real identity. Like, I was curious if someone actually sat down and did the work. And it's crazy, they do. Given that I read this, I learned a whole lot more about this entire thing that I was completely lost about, right? Because AI is the future, so knowing what's happening to humans, and especially now, is I think is imperative. Anyways, my final thoughts, okay? So overall, I think the book is thought-provoking. I think it's informative, and especially for people who are new to this topic, like if not everyone, no one really knows about this unless you read into it, kind of like I have now. It shines in revealing a hidden workplace and giving these workers a voice, right? Giving these workers a voice and giving me the ability to understand and recognize this and these people on the capitalism and the power structure that we have with how much power these companies have on the livelihood of their employees, like, or I guess not their employees, whatever they say. And I think that it falls short in the emotional side of it, and I guess the way it writes its tone. Um, of course, it can be moving. It just wasn't entirely the way I probably wanted it to, and I feel like its critique of capitalism, it does critique it fairly well, but it falls short a little bit because it doesn't. I think it could go deeper into it a little more, but I think it fell short there. And like I said, the solutions were just lightweight, compared to the deep rooted problems that we have. Would I recommend it? Absolutely, though. I would recommend it absolutely because I think everyone needs to have an idea of this, and so having a book basically going over everything you need to know, perfect.